Our great and glorious Heavenly Father, we come before you now. We thank you so much that we have this opportunity not only to be together, but the ability to share this time with others far and wide. We pray that all that we do here may be to your glory, to your honor, and we may gather strength from it to go forward and to walk towards your kingdom. We thank you so much for this evening, and we thank you for everyone here and everyone online. And we pray for all things through Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, John. Okay, so we have a few extra people here. Just a little bit of maybe extra review on what the class is about and where it's going. For y'all who don't know, the class is a visual presentation on what John saw in the visions on a continuous historical understanding of Revelation. And right now we're in chapter 8, and where we've gotten up to where, if you're not familiar with the history, where Constantine had risen to power and changed the Roman world from paganism to a Christian-based nation, and all the struggles that came with all of that. And of course, time would not permit to go back and cover that again. But just real quickly, and everything's supposed to work here. There we go. So just real quickly, I put this up here every now and then to remind us of where we have been and where we are going, and about how the Revelation is a series of seals, trumpets, and vials and thunders that you're all looking through time. And it's very hard to explain it in a couple of minutes. So I'm trusting in those that have been in Christadelphian circles for a long time. You'll have a good idea about where it might be going. But we looked at where the seals represented the judgments on pagan Rome. And we spent some time in the white robe multitude, which is a vision of the kingdom age. And then we are just now breaking into the trumpets, which are judgments on Catholic Rome, because Rome has gone from being pagan and it has now become Christian, but it's an understanding of the Bible is getting extremely distorted, and it's going in the direction of what we've seen the universal church become today. So just in review, now this is just kind of catching up with where we, what a little bit that we covered last week, and you guys who are just passing through and haven't seen it, I know that you're going to be a little in the dark on things, but hopefully some of it will be familiar to you. So we're breaking into the trumpets, the 7 trumpets that we're preparing to sound. And what we read last week was about the silence that was in heaven in chapter 8. When he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about the space of half an hour. And we looked at that actually had to do with once Constantine had taken over and done away with the other emperors. There were 3 emperors when Constantine came to power, and when he defeated the other 2, there was actually peace. But during this time is when Christianity was filling the vacuum of paganism, because Constantine was changing the world in that direction. And we talked about what was that half an hour, is that we looked at the figures. I certainly don't have time to go back again, but Constantine died a little over 14 years later. And if you do the day for a year and principle that we looked at in the math, 15 years would equal a half an hour. And he died about 14 years later, or about a half an hour, without going into a whole lot of detail on it, or about a half an hour. And also, when he did die, he left the empire to his sons, and from there the silence was broken. He had this 15 years of peace under him. That's with not fighting other nations, but there was a lot of infighting about who was going to be the head Christian organization that would stand by Constantine's side? Who was he going to side with on the viewpoints of whether Jesus was God or Jesus was man? And they were going back and forth. And we talked about how if you read the book When Jesus Became God, if any of y'all have read that, that's what that was all about, is this 14 and a half years that was taking place, that transition. But Edward Gibbons, who wrote the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, said that the general peace which Constantine had maintained during the last 14 years of his reign was a period of apparent splendor rather than of real prosperity. And the old age of Constantine was disgraced by the opposite yet reconcilable views of rapaciousness and prodigality, which is wasteful and extravagance and spending. In other words, his three sons, when they came into power, now you had three emperors again, which is a recipe for disaster and fighting and things of that nature. So, and we looked at, then we started focusing on the trumpets. And it said that 7 trumpets were about to sound, and we talked about where had we seen 7 trumpets before. And it was right here at Jericho. There were the 7 trumpets that went around. So these symbols are not foreign. You can find all of these things somewhere in Scripture, and that's what makes Revelations a little more easy to understand, that it's not a whole bunch of new things that has nothing to do with the rest of Scripture. Of course, those trumpets sounded the judgment that was about to come upon the city. And they marched around 7 times in 7 days and so on and so on. All right, so that's one of the things we talked about to get to see how the trumpets are used. And then we got to the point where still the trumpets haven't sounded, and it said in verse 5 that, and the angel took the censer, and this is in the open vision of Revelations where we've gone back and forth, but there was a censer there filled with the prayers of the saints. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it to the earth. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings and an earthquake. So we talked about, we've seen the voices and thunder and lightnings in other places in Scripture. It's not a new thing at all. And the earthquake, we talked about that after Constantine's sons, there was an emperor that came back in to power named Julian. And his desire was to bring paganism back to the forefront. And it reared its head briefly, and he persecuted the church clergy, bringing judgment and a political earthquake upon the church clergy, which gave the brothers and sisters of that day some rest, because rather than them being persecuted by the false church, the clergy was being persecuted by the emperor. And it gave him about 30, I looked it up, it was about 30 years of his reign that earthquake took place. At least that's what it seems to point to. It fits with history. So that brings us, this is where we left off, about the 7 angels, which had the 7 trumpets, prepared themselves to sound. Now, that's an interesting phrase. They're preparing to sound. They haven't blown yet. So what does this mean? They are preparing themselves to sound. Is it just 7 angels waiting around for their cue to blow the trumpet? It means something. So each trumpet brought invaders upon some part of the Roman Empire, and the trumpets are summoning those armies to move when it blows. But events are what's happening during this preparing to sound period. Events are lining up to take place as the players in this time period are being positioned to play their part in the trumpet period. And that's something we're going to start looking at tonight. Just as we today watch to see, how political movements are aligning with the last day events before Christ's return. And as we see one nation shift this way and shift that way, and suddenly one nation is in power and new world leader suddenly comes on, we know that God is lining things up for the final end. And that has been taking place all through this history, all through history. And we're going to see that tonight. All right. Now, from what I've learned and understood from this, and for those who are new to this, who haven't seen any of this before, I put this class, I didn't go in and try to totally figure this out from scratch. My purpose was to bring it to a visual, so we could see and maybe have some things in our head that John might have seen. But what I've done, I've gone back to all those who've gone before me and try to put their thoughts in a visual and add them to it. So there's John Thomas, Robert Roberts. I'd like to thank Gerald, helped me quite a bit. So it was about 4 dead and 3 living that I pulled together. These are not my thoughts, but they're thoughts of the brethren who have gone before me. And that's what I've tried to do, just so we could see it more visual rather than just reading the text. The first 4 trumpets are directed at central and western parts of the empire. And the last 3, or woe trumpets, appear to be directed at the Eastern Empire. And we'll see that. We're going to look at some history tonight. This is all about the history of this unfolding. If anybody has, a question or something or a comment they might to make, that's fine. But we don't want to get too distracted. So let it pertain to the direction this is going. All right, what happened in the clicker here? Hope it didn't die on me. Oh, all right. Wait, what did I have here? Okay, I lost my place. All right, so there was preparation to these invasions or an opening of the way for the other parties that were going to come into this. The first of these invaders were barbarians to the north of Rome, who did not have the discipline or strength in the past to invade Rome. Rome, up to this point, and for several hundred years, was never threatened to be overthrown. And as we know, Rome fell from within, and from all the problems they had, another nation didn't come in and just take over. It was pecked away at for centuries. And that's where this is starting, this pecking away at Rome and getting her weaker and weaker and weaker through history. But Rome had employed these barbarians to fight on their side against other invading tribes of barbarians. And when the barbarians that we will look at were prepared, they were already armed by Rome and within their borders. Did I hear something, Nancy?
Oh, yeah. That's what he's showing me.
Oh, okay. All right. They were tribal people, and they never grew into the strength of an actual nation with boundaries. They were tribal. And we will see that their time that they are involved is very short. They come and go very quickly, but they put a serious dent in Rome. That's why the trumpets keep sounding as another one comes. So that brings us, so we're going to open the book here on these barbarian invasions and see how they worked. And as you can see from this picture, Rome's not doing so hot. They are getting overwhelmed and run over. But the problem is that they employed the people that took over, but we'll look at that. Let's see. Things not moved through. The term barbarian, if you don't know what, I had to look it up. What is a barbarian? It refers to a person who is perceived to be uncivilized. The word is often used either in a general reference to a member of a nation or other ethnic group, typically a tribal society, and are viewed as inferior. So I see this as the same way the Americans looked at the Indians when they came here. They called them savages, and as if they were ignorant and didn't understand anything, when they were really quite intelligent. But they had not developed like technology and things like that. They had bows and arrows, we had guns and gunpowder and fortified cities where they lived in camps and things of that nature. So that doesn't mean that they were just ignorant people, because they must have been pretty smart to put some dents in Rome. And I doubt if the barbarians saw themselves as inferior. So anyway, unlike the Seal period that we just looked at, of political infighting, where we saw Romans assassinating Romans and killing each other, and emperors dying every 1.5 years and things like that. The barbarians march through the empire, looting and destroying everything in their path. And we're going to see that, and it happened very quickly when it did happen. And the safety of all Roman citizens was now threatened. Rome was forced to enter into treaties with the barbarians due to their weakened state. And you can imagine. What's that?
So I just was trying to clarify.
Okay.
So there's the Goths, the Visigoths, the
Mhm.
Lombards to the north.
Yeah.
To the east, you have Islam, which attacked all of Europe for, I don't know, well over 1,000 years. They were a huge threat.
They come later.
Not to mention the
The Huns,
Huns,
as the Visigoths, and
the Visigoths and the Goths and all those guys.
yeah, we're going to look at that. I got maps
Okay.
showing where they come from.
So this is talking about the first wave
The first, yeah,
from
You'll see.
the north instead of
Yeah.
from the east.
yeah, coming from the north.
Roger,
Yes.
can I say a point, please? When we're talking about these barbarian tribes invading, it is primarily, if not altogether, the western part of the Roman Empire. You know, the Roman Empire now is divided eastern and western, and the emperor is now seated in Constantinople in the east, whereas in Rome there was no sitting emperor to defend Rome, and those barbarian tribal kingdoms there, or not kingdoms, but tribal nations were coming against the Western Roman Empire and invading that area of the Roman Empire unopposed and having their way. So, you know, just a clarification that we need to know about that. These barbarians were attacking the Western seat of the Roman Empire, which was situated in Rome. But all that was there was the papacy and the Pope that was occupying Rome. Rome was dependent upon the Eastern Emperor from Constantinople to defend it, and it was not available at this time that the barbarians were making this invasion.
Okay. Thank you, Gerald. Yeah, I got some maps that we're going to look at to kind of show that out where they came in, at least historically, what's recorded. What I want to look at here first, this was the northern, pretty much border. The Rhine River and the Danube River were pretty much the northern border of Rome. And these two rivers made up those boundaries. And I looked it up. I got curious because I've had this picture for a good while, and I never really thought about these two rivers connected together is nearly 2,500 miles. Their northern border was 2,500 miles long.
I was laughing because I was just looking at river cruises. There is one that goes from
Yeah.
the North Sea all the way through the Rhine, connects to the Danube, and puts you out 21 days later at the Black Sea. So you can literally cruise through all of Europe.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. You can see why they fought over it. And when you look at pictures of it, it was a very beautiful place. It was a long boundary to hold and maintain, and the security of your country. And there were always, of course, skirmishes all the time on the borders, but not like what we're about to see. As Rome was weakening, they could, as I said, they would enter into treaties with other barbarian groups. And this is what got them in a bad way. And we're going to look at that. So here's a map I found that I found very helpful.
Yeah.
It's invasions of the Roman Empire from the 100s to the 500s, and that's the period of time we're in right now. We're in the, I would say, the early 400s. Yeah, it is the early 400s because we're going to see the first one happen around 408 and 410. And what we're going to be looking at is, see that one there, the Visigoths, that purple one coming in over there on the right through Greece, down above Greece, and then coming over and hitting Rome, and then spreading all the way, as Brother Gerald said, to the Western Empire. That was their conquest. And you can see they just kept coming at them through the centuries. It was you can see how it would have weakened them.
I was just gonna yell hooray for the English reactions, the Danes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, the first one we're going to look at is the Visigoths, and we can see that they came, of course, through Greece, as we know it today, and they sacked Rome and kept all the way to Spain. Imagine Rome is being sacked. That, of course, we know that Rome at one time was the capital, but the capital right now is over there in Constantinople. But they came right through here, like Gerald was saying, and it's like no one was able to stop them. And we're going to look at about 4 of them that appear to fit with these historical events. The preparation to sound was done through the settling of these people known as the Goths in Rome. And I say in Rome, I'm in the Roman Empire, not the city of Rome. Rome allowed them to join their ranks militarily, and that's to help them fight off the Huns. If you read the history, I went online to find all this stuff of who these people were, and we can see how it became an invitation to disaster. And fleeing from the Huns, the Goths, were granted permission to enter the Roman territory, and the Romans armed them to help them militarily against the Huns. So as time went on, after a while, and you can read the story on this guy in more detail yourself, but the measure to employ their help had the opposite effect. The Goths gradually awoke to their sense of power, and the preparation for the sounding of the first trumpet was complete. Now, this didn't happen overnight. The Goths were there for a good while, and that was that preparing thing where these barbarians were being moved in, so when the trumpet sounded, that first trumpet, the judgment came. When the Goths saw the potential to turn on Rome, they were already within the midst of Rome. They had been armed by Rome. And so this wasn't a fight taking place hundreds of miles away on some distant border. They were right there armed and in their military. So it was an easy, once they got their strength up, to turn on them and take advantage of the Roman situation. So what we're going to do now is look at this first trumpet and who these barbarians, that's the history is, I can do it in general without spending a whole lot of time on how they moved and what all. So if anybody has a question, now might be a good time to ask it about them. Otherwise I'll move on and we'll look at this first attack.
I just have one comment, please.
Yes, sir.
The Goths there were actually Eastern and Western Goths, and that's why the names Ostrogoths and Visigoths designated Eastern and Western Goth barbarian nations there.
Okay. Thank you,
It
Gerald.
actually means the Ostrogoths were the Eastern Goths, the Visigoths were the Western Goths.
Okay. Thank you, Gerald. So let's open the curtain on this. I always like that.
We know.
Okay, so the next verse we have, and the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire, mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Now, remember that Rome had been under Constantine's son and had returned to 3 rulers. So this fits very well with the third part being hit with this trumpet. And we're going to look at these words here. Again, we have components here, hail and fire, a third part of the trees and the grass. So what does all that mean? So to cast upon the earth means this is the Roman arena. Again, we've talked before, it's not talking about the whole planet, but the targeted nation that it is being directed at. Hail and fire, where have we seen these before? Anybody know? Sound familiar?
What, Sodom and Gomorrah?
Uh,
Sodom and Gomorrah?
I don't know if that mentions hail, but
Well, the
Fire and brimstone, I guess.
happened in
plagues.
Egypt,
right, in
the
Egypt,
hail was one of them. And it came with thunder.
yeah,
I think it's in Exodus 9.
yeah, it's right here, 9:23. All right, I'll let y'all read some verses.
I was about to
I'll
say
start here. Leo, you want to read this?
Okay. Exodus 9:23. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt.
Okay, so here we have where that was literally used, and you can see this word thunder, where remember when the censer hit the earth, there was thunder, lightning, and voices. So we can see sort of a shadow of this, that it is a judgment that has taken place. Now, we see again, as mentioned, as we looked at a week or so ago, about the trees and the grass. What is that referring to? That he burned up all the trees and the grass? Well, we don't, well, at least from what I can understand, I don't see it as literal, because we talked about in Mark 8:24, the man who was receiving his sight said he looked up and he said, I see men as trees walking. So
I was going to ask you if men were equated as trees or not. Because you do see that with that miracle and a couple other places.
I think someone brought up that blessed is he who stands not in
That's Psalms 1.
yeah, that it would be like a tree and all. But also the grass in Isaiah 47. Joe, you want to read this? I'll just kind of go around.
The grass withers, the flower fades, because the Spirit of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass.
So here we have a direct quote of referring to people as grass. So we can look at what this is saying when it's the burn up a third of the trees and the grass. It's the people. A third of this empire is getting hit very hard. The people are. It's not so much just a destruction of burning fields and forests and things of that nature. And it said only a third part of the earth was affected, only a third. So, and it's interesting that we have three parts to this. And Constantine's sons divided the empire into three parts: the eastern, the western, and the central. And this map here, now it's a little grainy, it's the best I could find, but if you look at that date there, this was the Roman Empire after 337 AD. Constantine died in 337 AD. So you can see what became the empire. It became broken into thirds. I mean, it just seems to fit. We mostly hear about the Western and the Eastern, but here history supports that the third part that the prophecy that we're looking at requires of it. So I suggest to you that this might be a guidepost that God has given us, that in this time there were three parts to the Roman Empire. Normally we just think of the East and the West, but it was not the case in that day. And that central part was called Illyricum, if I'm saying that. Illyricum? Illyricum, is that what you say it? I-L-L-Y. Yes, and it was referred to as that area. And of course, we can see that Rome is in that third part. Now, here's our first character that came in, and his name was Alaric, if I say that right. He was king of the Goths. He was most famous for his sack of Rome in 410. So that tells you where we are in time, and fitting with these maps that we've looked at, which marked a decisive event in the decline of the Roman Empire. Excuse me, I might. Alaric was a commander in the Roman army. See, here's the advantage he got. He was denied promotion, and with the disproportionate loss of his people in these fights that they were in with Rome, they turned against Rome. They got tired of being the guy, I guess, that was thrown to the lions. I guess the Romans look at them as expendable, but they didn't.
So why you need to promote your people,
Yeah.
turn against you if you don't.
Right. Alaric brought into focus for the first time in history that Rome was no longer invincible. That Rome was like one of those things, countries where who could overthrow the Roman Empire? It was so big and so powerful. But keep in mind, Christianity is eating away at this also, because as people came to Christ, they weren't joining the military, they weren't serving the gods, the money towards the military and things like that. So you have this little eating away at the resources that are available to them. And when you got 2,500-mile long borders with that, how do you maintain that as things deteriorate? You know, so that's why they had to employ other groups, what would you call them, mercenaries or things of that nature. But you know, you take a big chance when you bring these foreigners in to fight on your side who are not necessarily loyal to the Roman way of life. Alaric, upon gaining Goth independence from his first decisive battles with the Romans, wasted no time and proceeded to lay the greatness of Rome in the dust. I'm getting this right off of the historical books. Before entering Italy, he ravaged many provinces, and the beautiful homes along the banks of the Rhine were laid waste. So it's like they just went through, but it's interesting what we're going to see here. They never tried to take over Rome and rule Rome here. They just went through, and it was a judgment, and that's the way they were working. He then turned his focus on Rome itself, the city, and besieged it 3 times between 408 and 410 AD, bringing its inhabitants, the trees and the grass, to starvation. It's interesting, he didn't take Rome and sit on the throne, any kind of throne or anything like that. He took what he wanted and then he left. He used it as one big collection of booty and things like that. He just went through and took everything he wanted.
But I realized the motivation for all this was the Roman reprisals in his own land, right? It was Rome invading their territory and taking taxes and revenue from them, and they hated it. So I thought that was why he did all this, but I was just asking.
I did not come across that, but it could be another detail that I haven't found.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering what motivated him. I'm just curious.
Well, like I said, that Alaric joined up with the Romans because the Huns were giving them a very hard time. So they came to Rome for safety. But in the meantime, they grew in power. We're not talking about a few hundred men. We're talking about tens of thousands of these people that came over the borders and joined the ranks. And if they suddenly defect to their own side, then you've got a real problem on your hands. It's interesting. I believe John Thomas put it this way, but I'm not sure. What Jerusalem had suffered 4 centuries earlier is now returned upon the head of Rome. And you remember in Jerusalem, 70 AD, Rome was experiencing, at 70 AD, Rome is now experiencing similar conditions. When the capital is threatened, the whole country and way of life is threatened. And that's what Rome was experiencing at this time.
And that's what left. What's his name? He became the new Caesar in Rome because there were so many Caesars at the time. And that's what left. Trajan's arch is because he was left behind and his commander was moved to Rome and he became the new Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was this chaotic time that, well, it was another chaotic time, I guess, because it was 70 years and all that took place.
This is 400 years.
Yeah.
350 years later.
So it was. So the Caesar at this point was still in Constantinople, right?
It's as far as I know. Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. So here's a turning point. In 410, during these campaigns, Alaric died. The very year he sacked Rome, he died. and the fire and the hail mingled with blood had expended themselves. And it almost just stopped. It seems to say from the way other things happen. And here we see how quickly God will change the situation. Alaric died the year he sacked Rome. Alaric was raised. I think what we need to take from this, Alaric was raised up for this purpose, then removed when he had served his purpose, just as God had raised up Pharaoh for his purpose to free Israel with a mighty hand. Not that but here Alaric was raised up to be one of the trumpets. These things are happening for the saints of the ages to see how God was and is working in the nations continually. It's not just something he's doing now. The world would only see history unfolding randomly. Alaric never took over Rome or sat on the throne as most invaders would do. He just pillaged and destroyed what he wanted. And that was his purpose to do, and then he died. And he died very suddenly while he was still in the campaign, but he had served that purpose. I think it's an interesting piece of history. Got something else in here. Let's see. I see it maybe, some people might not think so, but I think I have a real connection to the Civil War. I see it so much Abraham Lincoln was assassinated just as he had won the Civil War. He no sooner got that victory and he was taken out. Now, how would the things have continued if Abraham Lincoln served 4 more years? We don't know. But God rules in the kingdoms of men and puts over them whomsoever he pleases. So all of these people sometimes are taken out very suddenly when a purpose is finished. So I think that's what's happened with him here. And what we find that there would be a 20-year interval of peace before the sounding of the next trumpet. And what we can see from this, the barbarians have shown what they can do, and Rome is no longer invincible, and it's going to continue to deteriorate over the next 1,000 years going forward. Any questions on Alaric before we move on? I know it might be a lot of new history to some people, but it seems to fit.
So Alaric is the first trumpet.
I believe he is, or at least what the brethren came up with, tracking through time of how it fit and what he did, and how he it's about dealing with each third. All right.
So did a third of the people die of starvation?
Well, I don't know if the whole third, but he attacked the third. Remember, there was.
Oh,
That's the third part, is that Rome was in 3 sections.
Yep.
So these trumpets seem to fit with that.
okay.
How are we on time?
We've got
20 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. so-
It might be well to note that in this first trumpet, it says that a third of the trees were burned up. So it didn't identify which of the third of the entirety of the empire was affected here. It didn't name it in this prophecy about the first trumpet, but we know historically, as you pointed out, that it was in reference to the sacking of the city of Rome itself by the Gothic invasions.
Right. That would have been the biggest blow, because that was such an important place in their world.
Right.
I mean, right on the port right there.
What you see that it accomplishes, they take out the central part of Rome, which isolates west from east. And so now you've got isolated things that can be attacked independently as this piece in the middle dries up and is destroyed over time.
So now we're in 430 AD, which you said is a 20-year time of peace.
Yeah, that's
What the second trumpet?
Yeah, for the second trumpet, we now move forward about 20 years where Alaric disappears, they go away. I guess it's no longer a threat, and Rome, I guess, is licking its wounds, but it's not over. The next wave is coming, the second trumpet. So this one I always found very interesting too. And here's what the verse says. And the second angel sounded as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. So we got something new here.
I thought that was the definition of Hawaii.
That
Seriously, it looks like a volcano in the South Pacific.
that came out of the sea, this was cast into the sea. Here we have another whole set of dynamics. First it was hail and fire, now we have a burning mountain. And again, these are not new symbols. If we, mountains, as we can see, and we should remember, can represent political powers, both good and bad. And scripturally, here I try to always show the proof that it's not that the pattern fits, at least fits. Here's what we know about Babylon. Who's next to read? Can you read that? Can you read it right here?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Jeremiah 51:25. Behold, I am against you, O destroying mountains, saith the Lord, which destroys all the earth. And I will stretch out my hand upon you and roll thee down from the rocks, and will make you a burnt mountain.
Now, that was a reference to Babylon. And it says he destroys all of the earth. Here we have the earth being destroyed. Of course, we know he didn't destroy the planet, but he did a lot of destruction in the targeted area that it's referring to. And we see the destroying mountain, and he says, I'm going to make you a burnt mountain. So here we have something that we've already read about to see what could this be, Trumpet being referring to. It's not Babylon, but it's about nation. In Nebuchadnezzar's image, we read this. So John, you want to read this?
Daniel 2:35. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold broken into pieces together, and became like chaff in summer's threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth.
Okay, here's a mountain on the good side and there's mountains on the bad side. So mountains can refer to nations attacking and things of that nature. So what we have in Revelation that helps us say, what is all this about a burnt mountain? What is that referring to? What's referring about the next oncoming onslaught of military movement. What the verse goes on, we're still looking at it. And it said, and a third part of the sea became blood, and a third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed. Okay, so if we understand mountains as nations, here we have ships. So and creatures, and again, another third part of something is under attack. So from this, our trumpet blast appears to be directed at the sea. And once again, a third part of something is destroyed, and the third part of the creatures and ships. Keep in mind that creatures doesn't always mean animals of the earth. Remember the 4 living creatures in our opening scene that were full of eyes? They represented the multitudinous Christ, as we understand. So, but they were called creatures. So creatures can refer to man also. These are, again, the connections that we make to what is all this about. And as we can see, this is going to be a naval conflict. The burning mountain is going to be the Vandal nation that comes. We'll look at that on that map again here, I think. And it will be inflicted on what appears to be the western third of the empire. So if we look at our map again, if you see the Vandals, if you see that blue line coming down up to the north there, and then coming right down through France and Spain, as we know it, coming across the, what's that, the Rock of Gibraltar?
Yeah, it's for the very end.
Is that what it's called?
The mouth of the Mediterranean.
Yeah. And they come across, and then look how they attack. They attack from the sea. Not, well, they had been attacking coming down through the Western Empire, but they wanted, Rome was, and controlling the Mediterranean was the target that they were after. So let's look at this next person who comes into play. His name was Genseric. He was king of the Vandals from 428 to 477. He was one of the key players in the troubles of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century. This is, again, documented history. And And the word vandals is where we get the word vandalist. You ever thought that has to do with barbarians attacking? That's what you would call the little kids.
Can you go back to
Roll
Richmond,
your-
please?
The little kids that threw toilet paper all over your front yard, the little vandals. No, they just, that's where it comes from. I thought that was interesting. You got what you need there?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and here's a coin of him. It's pretty rough, but he did actually get coins minted with himself. So he did pretty good. But this next thing I'm going to show you is very interesting, and this is painted history. This is an actual painting, which I'm sure is hundreds of years old. This is a painting of Genseric sacking Rome. So remember, what were the Trumpets targeting? They were targeting Catholic Rome. That's what they were directed at. And this is history recording this for the believers. If you look right here, what do you see?
I guess the
It looks like a Catholic bishop.
What about the
I see a menorah in the
I know,
background.
what about the menorah?
Yeah, but it shows that they're hitting, this painting is about them hitting the church, is what this was about. And it's their target of ransacking this situation. I thought it was extremely interesting. And I suggest to you that it can be a guidepost for us. That for the all who didn't know, the title of my whole class is Guideposts Through Time. Things that direct us in this direction. So that was just something that I thought was very interesting to find that. So going on, a burning mountain in the sea the burning mountain was in full steam in this situation. And here's what by taking Carthage, he separated Africa from the Roman Empire. Remember Carthage all down there across the top of Africa?
When did you do that?
Huh?
When did you do that?
During that period of time, for those dates that you just wrote down.
I had 5th century, 428 to 477.
Yeah, somewhere in that, during that was
15
his,
years.
that was his chant, that his thing. Yeah. As a result, the Vandals sacked Rome, and piracy in the Mediterranean, and they were just total pirates in the Mediterranean. It became important to the Roman Empire to restore the Vandal kingdom because most of their grain came from Egypt. Your food supply came up from that Nile area and all that area. Now they were getting control of that. But as history records, all maritime trade in the Mediterranean had become crippled. That was a big thing. The Eastern and the Western Roman fleets at different times were rallied to attack Genseric's fleet. So you can see how this is all out in the ocean to put this guy down. Now think about, we talked about another third of creatures dying in the sea. Think about how many oarsmen are on every one of these boats. There's hundreds and hundreds of oarsmen on every boat that goes down takes all these people down with them. And the manpower that are in these ship battles is enormous if you read the stories of it. Now, Genseric used the tactic of fire ships to thin out and break up the Roman fleet. And if you don't know what fire ships are, it's very interesting how he did this. What are fire ships? This is a painting of something of that nature.
Use it to ram their armada. You set your own ship ablaze and ram it right into the middle of another ship.
Yeah, the way it was recorded that I got was fire ships were old ships filled with combustibles, then set on fire and steered into the midst of the enemy's fleet, consequently setting many on fire. You can imagine those sails going up, and you can imagine all the ships trying to avoid them, how this is breaking up their planned attack, because you got infernos coming at you. And if I understand right, that a lot of their signals were done by smoke and things like that from ship to ship. There were things like, how did these ships communicate with each other? And this would cause absolute confusion. Communications were just almost nil. Trying to steer around this, and you could just no longer signal your ships and coordinate attack. And this is what they did. The Vandals captured the western fleet and destroyed the eastern through the use of these fire ships. This is, again, recorded history of what they did. And the events that would unfold were well symbolized by the burning mountain, sea of blood, and the loss of ships and creatures. It just seems to fit. It's I mean, we try to find what lines up with history, and this appears to line up with it. During his nearly 50 years of rule, Genseric raised a relatively insignificant Germanic tribe to the status of a major Mediterranean power, which after he died, entered a swift decline and eventual collapse. See, it happens again. Even though he sacked Rome, also he did not, like the others, did not sit on, try to run the government. It was meant as a judgment, not as a political takeover. Think about that. We once again see history record their victories, but disappear from the scene. And Rome still exists, only weaker each time. They've lost so much. History is recorded, I believe, for our understanding of God's plan, not just to be read as past history. And that will bring us to we won't have time to get into the third trumpet, but we can see how these judgments were thrown at them. They did a terrible devastation to their infrastructure, their commerce, their lives, their way of life, and then they suddenly disappeared. It's just very interesting that these barbarians didn't try to take over the government. They just took what they wanted and just did their thing. They were tribal. They didn't work on the same government platform, I guess, like other countries do. So that's where I want to stop tonight. I hope that was of some interest in some way. Anybody got any questions or thoughts?
Just to share with you that this naval tactic has been used again and again and again. So we sing that line from the song, from the shores of Tripoli. But Tripoli is where, exact following this example, Jefferson got tired of paying the Barbary pirates. Every nation in Europe was paying the Barbary pirates of North Africa to stop pillaging their cargo ships. And Jefferson was like, enough is enough. Let's get our own navy and take care of this. So they made 6 fleets, sailed over there. And one of their ships, I think the Philadelphia, was almost going to get captured. So they set it ablaze, set it right into their armada, burned their ships. Same tactic as what was used as Genseric. So I just think it's not new now, because I guess he started it then or even earlier, but you see it in lots of other places.
Yeah. But this was, as far as things happening in the sequence of the trumpets blowing, it appears that
Yeah, that's interesting.
that's the best we can do with what we're given from history. And as I've said many times, I don't think the Lord would leave us blind. He wouldn't put all this revelation out here and say, figure it out if you can. I don't think you will, but he certainly wouldn't leave us blind. It was written for us, his servants, so that they might see how he's working through the centuries before all of this is over. Well, anyway, thank you, Robbie. That's what I have for tonight. Y'all are getting a very little snippet of everything we've already done. I hope it's of interest. What's the time?
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Anything else out there in the cheap seats?
But again, Brother Roger, these trumpet soundings for the purpose of bringing God's judgment upon pagan Rome and following that papal Rome, as you mentioned earlier, each of these players, so to speak, in the grand drama of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, played their part in weakening and bringing to naught the portions of that empire on the way to completely, destroying the Roman Empire. So as you said, Genseric, he played the part there in the Mediterranean Sea and the northern coast of Africa. When he played that part, his part was done, and we move on to the third trumpet then, and as we see the effect of that empire being attacked and broken up piece by piece.
Yeah, they come and go very quickly.
Yeah.
Which tells us there's a pattern here. You know, Rome took hundreds of years to grow to its mastery that they were, and then they took hundreds of years to die. But these people came and went within a 50-year span, 20-year span. They were gone and off in history. So,
Yeah.
And the trumpets require something of that nature. History requires it because of the way the trumpets are written. So that these are sounding to bring these armies into play, one right after the other. So it's a bombarding of it. Brother James, would you close with prayer?
Sure. Father, it's in Jesus' name, we come to you in prayer. Lord, thank you for this evening you've given us to come together and enjoy a fellowship and read your word. Please, Lord, strengthen our hearts for the days coming. And bring us together as a body to just stand together so this world will see who you are. Help us, Lord, to shine your light to this world and that we can love it very much.
Well, for those of you who are online and didn't visit us tonight, we had quite a feast. I was particularly shocked that Norma and Karen didn't come. Very shocked.
You could have at least watched the feed.
Hey, this, yeah.
Yeah, we missed you guys too. I've been doing another class for a while, so that's why we haven't been here.
Well, Karen, can you text me so I have your phone number?
Yes, I can.
You have mine?
I don't have your phone number, but I can send you an email. I have your email.
Okay.
Also good to see Julie Cody joining us and Fonda.
Hey, Julie and Fonda, how are you? There are silent partners.
I think that I bored them to no thought.
Well, it's good.
So we're gonna leave you guys and head over to the Kentucky Bible School for the next session.
All right, have a good
Okay, have
night.
a good night.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Roger. Good night. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
So,
Thank you.